Welcome to the Across the Spoilerverse podcast. You know who it is by now. If you're this deep into it, you're on board with it. You're one of the members who joins us every single week to check out the podcast. We love you guys. As always, I'm your host Paul from Heavy Spoilers, joined by none other than Greg from Real Rejects. Greg, how's it going? It's quite a positive week again. I've got some good news, good feelings about it this time. Let's go.
We got good feelings today, Paulson. We got good feelings. And by the way, if you guys listen to us on Apple and Spotify, please rate this video or audio, whatever it may be. Helps us out in the long run. But
Yeah.
I'm excited, man. You sent me the breakdown for today, and it's mostly good news. It's making me feel a little empty on the inside. I feed off the negativity, but too much good news today. Too much good news.
Give into your anger. Set your feelings. So yeah, weekend box office domestic. We're starting off on a bit of a negative note,
Thank
but
God.
we've got the top three. Yeah, we've got the top three domestic box office numbers here. Paw Patrol 2 has come in at 23 million, Saw X at 18 million, and The Creator at 14 million, which it's not very good. I did kind of feel like The Creator was going to be a bit of a flop, but I really enjoyed the movie. I was hoping that it would get good word of mouth. I was telling people, yeah, go see it, please go see it, because the thing is, Greg, I see the same comments popping up on every single video that we do whenever we cover Marvel or Star Wars or something that's more of a franchise-based thing. You always get the Hollywood's crap now, nothing's original.
Yeah.
It's just the same old sequels and reboots over and over. And then we get given this original story, original sci-fi. No one goes to see it. So you get what you deserve, guys. You get what you deserve. You've got to go support this stuff when it comes out. So yeah, 14 million. Why do you think it didn't do that well?
I mean, I saw the trailers on my own time, and I like the trailers. Like, it looked visually appealing, but it is one of those cases where I can even see why it might not have done well. From like, a lot of people chalk it up to, oh, it's not a known IP or anything like that. But at the same time, some people have told me that, oh, there's visual elements that remind me of things like Blade Runner 2049 or the original Blade Runner, for that matter. And you would know better than I would in that regard. But even a movie like Blade Runner 2049 ultimately didn't do all that well. And sure, maybe because it's not an original IP, but I feel like they really, I mean, maybe because it's an original, it's not like based off of some, pre-established IP. At the same time, I feel like they really pushed the marketing on this one. They were gung ho about it, but perhaps there was something emotionally tangible that was not able to truly sell us on the experience overall. And when you think about the what makes something truly original, there was a lot of things that I felt people were saying was, oh, it reminds them of this, it reminds them of this, it reminds them of that. So maybe even perhaps the thing that's being talked about all the time is this is a really expensive, like $80 million film, and it's an original film. At the same time, perhaps what makes it truly original was not the thing that was being sold to audiences. At the end of the day, I get their names confused. Which Gareth is it? Is it Edwards or Evans? I forget which one it is. One of them.
Those ones.
The one who did not do the raid. That Gareth guy, he's not as well known as a director. Like, if you put Nolan's name on this, sure, it probably would have done better. But we're not in 1999 anymore, or whenever The Matrix came out, where you can have a totally original looking sci-fi film where you don't need a huge director's name. At the same time, that had Keanu Reeves and John David Washington is not as big of a box office, star or box office pull. So I can see how there's a lot of factors ultimately working against it. It's not a pre-existing IP. The trailers themselves, while really good and probably speak to film enthusiasts or cinephiles, ultimately are not reaching audiences that are not within that specific category. And it's a bummer because everyone I know that's seen it actually really enjoys it, even though that it's not, void of its criticisms. Everyone I know that's seen it has really enjoyed it, you included as well. But why do you think it flopped?
I think sci-fi in general really has an uphill struggle at the box office. It's very rare that you see a completely original IP sci-fi film do really, really well. And a lot of times, well, more often than not, those movies tend to flop. Because I was thinking today, like Terminator did really well. Avatar, obviously, massive thing. But then you've got these sort of scattered films in between that, like your Contacts. Obviously, The Matrix did really well. but like
In
Arrival, stuff like
Arrival,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, they always kind of underperform. And yeah, it's weird seeing it because they'll get good reviews, they'll get good word of mouth, but for some reason, general audiences just don't ever go out and see them. And these films tend to pick up great followings once they hit home release. So I'm thinking that's what will happen with this. It was shot on a very modest budget. It was 80 million. I think it looks absolutely. I mean, this is obviously. I'm parroting a lot of things that have been said over and over and over about this movie, but I think it looks incredible for its budget. It blows so many other films out the water, especially ones you've seen released this year. And it's kind of insane to see how good it looks when you compare it to stuff that has like $300 million budgets. And yeah, I'm guessing it just doesn't seem like it connected with audiences, whether it's not, it didn't really have, John David Washington, he's becoming more of a known name, but he's not that household name, that must see actor that you want to.
Mhm.
Even Tenet didn't have a massive following behind it. And unfortunately, yeah, it's a casualty, I think, of just the way that Hollywood's trained people to be. Ever since the pandemic, we've had it in our minds that if we're not desperate to go and see a movie, it's going to hit streaming very soon, and we can just wait for it to go on home release. And
Yeah.
studios have kind of shot themselves in the foot by doing this, and it's just the pandemic just affected behavior and how audiences view stuff. And with sci-fi in general not doing those massive numbers, it just didn't seem like a lot of people were feeling like they really got sold on the film, which is a shame because again, it's a really good movie, and I think once it hits that home releases, there's going to be a lot of people that come around on it and go, "Oh, I'd love to see a sequel to that." It's like, well, it made no money, mate. So sod yous, we're going back to doing Marvel and Star Wars movies and nothing else for the next 25 years.
All the original films that succeed are because this is like the big conversation around it is that it's it's a relatively big like it's a modest budget considering the kind of blockbusters that are out there now, but it's bigger than a low budget film. It's still above mid budget range, right? And when you think about the original films that still actually do well, it's the horror category, man. It's all like that
Yeah,
A24 horror, or it doesn't even have to be A24, but generally it is horror that still is the thriving genre, and you get a lot of
yeah,
originality in there, and that seems to be the main genre that actually can still thrive with truly original content. You know,
yeah. And we've got the Exorcist Believer coming out this week. I'm like a crazy Exorcist fan. One of the best movies of all time, I think. And I'm
are
not
you
going to go
excited
see
for
it.
it?
No, I don't want to do it, and it's because I'm more anxious that it's going to be terrible. I'm really, really worried that it's going to come out and be like a modern retelling and just jump scares and everything that the original Exorcist wasn't. And I mean, obviously the original Exorcist had its jump scares in, but the horror in that's a lot more subtle, and there's a lot of hidden
Yeah.
layers and subliminal things going on with it. And I think from what I've seen of this, it just looks very kind of possession 101 movies. You know what I mean? Like The
Yeah.
Exorcist kind of set the standard for those possession movies, and then ever since then, they've just kind of all followed the same sort of archetype. And yeah, I feel like it's going to go in that direction. I'll check it out on streaming, but I'm not rushing out to see it at the cinema. And
I,
maybe just give it a skip.
I went to Halloween Horror Nights over the weekend. Do you know what that is?
Nope, but I'm guessing it's a Halloween horror night.
Yep, you nailed it, Paul. At Universal Studios, they they basically put together like these Halloween events where it's like it runs from Thursday through Sunday, starting from September to October, where it's jam packed. It's super packed every single day, and they put together these mazes. Like they had a Last of Us maze, which was pretty cool. They had a Chucky one, and then they have Exorcist. They have the Exorcist Believer maze, and you really they recreate the sets, and it's a lot of like scarers and whatnot, and a lot of actors and costumes and makeup. And the whole point is you're walking through it, and then they jump out and scare you, but you're also getting an idea of what the movie is, because the idea is to sort of submerge, like they had an Evil Dead Rise maze. So, they're going through the apartment, the elevator, and all these things to kind of give you an idea. And because it's Universal, they really build this stuff, and they get to use the actual props and a lot of the actual makeup. So it's very like Hollywood involved. And I went through Exorcist Believer, and as I was walking through it, And even though it's supposed to be the ultimate experience of horror and the music's blasting and you got the people in makeup and they're kind of spoiling some scenes for you, I just found myself with my hands in my pocket going, I'm just not interested in this movie. I thought I would be, but I'm
Yeah,
really not excited for it. And then the maze, I won't spoil anything of what they should, because part of me was going, I feel like they're kind of spoiling some really big plot points in this one maze I'm walking through, and the movie's not even out yet. And I'm going, this is a little much. This is a little too much. I think they're going a little too big in this movie. You get a good idea of, because like what you were talking about of how it's being like possession movie 101, and a lot of it is within the subtlety of the dread and the horror and the psychological terror. And there's like these monsters that they had in the maze. I was going to say, and it was really populating the
yeah,
maze. To give you an idea, when I went through Last of Us, there's a lot of clickers, which makes sense. And then here they were really showcasing these monsters. And I was going, I don't even recall these monsters in the trailer, but they're all over this maze. And I feel like
yeah.
they're overdoing it, which got me. So I didn't think the maze would be the thing that really makes me get concerned about a film.
Yeah, I mean, it's the 50th anniversary of The Exorcist this year, which shows its staying power. There's not many horror movies that were made 50 years ago that are still, getting sequels and stuff. William Friedkin died this year as well. And yeah, I'm just kind of apprehensive about it. It's one of those films. There's been so many bad Exorcist sequels and prequels as well. I don't know if you know, Greg, but the Exorcist prequel, they actually shot it twice. And what happened was
Oh,
that both
really?
starring Stellan Skarsgård, so they made a version of it, right? They did the whole prequel stuff, and they realized after they'd shot the entire thing, they didn't really like it that much. So they went back, reshot the whole movie from the ground up, right? And then released that. But then that didn't get well received. So they went back and got the original thing that they shot and then released that. Insane story. Honestly, this is what happened
What?
though. You guys will you go check it out. This is what happened. It was I forgot the names. But yeah, there's a hell of a lot of stuff. So there's Exorcist, the beginning, and Dominion. Dominion, the prequel to Exorcist.
Mm.
Both pretty much the exact same movie. If you watch them, you'll be blown away by it. And yeah, both were released, but in the wrong order that they were shot. So very strange story. But that's coming this week. October is going to be a big month for horror. I'm hoping to
Oh,
go
yeah.
out to the cinema to see some of this stuff, but we're going to have to see. We're joined by a guest here, if you guys can see, little cat. So yeah, the cat's on board. That's a bit of a creepy thing for Halloween. A bit of a creepy. We're
Ooh.
gonna get creepy in the show.
Ooh. Wait till I get my black cat.
Ooh.
Ooh.
Now, some good news of the show. Yeah, the writers' strike is over, as we reported last week. We reported it first before anyone else says,
Hell yeah.
but we didn't. No,
We
obviously.
win.
So the details of the deal that they've struck came out, and for this part of the video, we're going to be breaking down exactly what was said. And Greg, do you want to take it bit by bit and kind of go through them? This comes from Screen Rant, who've wonderfully put out a list. And number one point is Hollywood has improved the showrunner training program. So crucially, this is said to be the number one point. The WGA have reached an agreement to renew the $250,000 in annual funding for the showrunner training program. So this is basically a program that helps creators and writer producers hone their skills so that they can become basically accomplished professionals in their field and then go on to, basically learn what they've watched when shadowing other creators and run their own show. In the past, they weren't putting that much money into it, and you were kind of creating a sort of I want to say dead end where people were coming on board, writers seeing what was going
Yeah.
on, but their contracts would be cut short and ended at the end of a show, and they'd get no more experience on that, wouldn't get hired for anything else, and they just basically live their life just being these bottom level people who never had any chance of promotion or working their way up to that. So that's a pretty good solid thing.
Is part of that to compensate for, because a lot the writers really wanted to get rid of the writers' rooms, not the writers' rooms.
Mm,
What were those called? Mini rooms, not the writer. They want to get rid of the writers' rooms. They want to get rid of the mini rooms, and they weren't able to successfully get rid of that. But I feel like this helps alleviate some of the pain of still having to keep that on, because you
yeah,
get to have an extended contract and you get an opportunity to at really getting the skills developed so you can be a showrunner one day, which is generally like if you don't want to become, a screenwriter for films. This is actually one of the next best things where you could become like the writer producer head of it, essentially the Vince Gilligan or the Tina Fey. I think that's a really cool thing.
Yeah. What's the next point?
The next point, if we're going in the order here, screenwriters, they've been secured improved terms for high budgets SVOD, subscription video on demand. So in order for screenwriters to be able to secure the fixed domestic and foreign residuals for VOD and SVOD, they needed streaming data transparency. Therefore, the WGA must now be provided with the total number of hours a series or feature-length film is streamed both domestically and internationally under a confidentiality agreement, meaning the public won't see it, but they can see it. This includes certain high-budget original series like Stranger Things or Wednesday, the numbers for which the WGA may share with its members, who will now be paid 150% premium for original pilots for high-budget streaming videos on demand and 115% premium for backup scripts. This is so... It's interesting that they're going to be able to see it, and you have to become like a really successful working writer to get this. I liken it to how like the government knew about aliens and they couldn't talk about it. We all want to know the streaming numbers, and now the writers are going to be able to know. I think this is a really big win for the writers, though, because if I'm not mistaken, originally studios were AMPTP was we're not going to show you jack shit. We're never going to show you any of this. And now they have at least conceded to, all right, we'll show you, but you just got to keep your mouth shut. Things are going to get leaked, though. Someone's going to leak some stuff, and we're going to get some numbers.
100%. And I've always theorized that the reason they haven't let this stuff get out is because of how much it would affect the company's stock. For example, if they release a big show, they say they've got 14 million viewers on. We'll not name any names. But I like Ahsoka, by the way. We're getting negative. I'm just making a joke. Yeah, 14. That was the most recent show I could think of. But yeah, if it turned out that wasn't actually the case because someone leaked the numbers out, it would obviously make people question exactly what the streaming numbers are, and it could cause negative effects on the stock. So I can see why the studios have wanted to keep this secret in the past. They obviously know their own streaming numbers. But yeah, they want to keep this locked down. We'll see if it gets out, but at least with the writers, they can have more transparency and think, at least I know I'm not getting ripped off when I only get paid so much, but they're also online saying, look how successful this show is. And it's like, actually, it's not that successful, but they're just doing PR work so that the company doesn't sink. So yeah, I think that's one of the best things that they've got out of it, to be honest.
Definitely.
That's a massive help to them. And yeah, and screenwriters, point 3, screenwriters have a new streaming deal. So this says one of the biggest priorities for the WGA was finding a way to have writers' compensation reflect the success of wildly popular streaming series like Stranger Things or Euphoria. Fortunately, in addition to the fixed existing residuals, the Guild established a viewership-based model as well that would reward shows and thus writers with greater viewership, and studios agreed. I don't actually know what this means, Greg. I'm reading through it.
I was hoping you would explain it, man.
Yeah, it's just saying that.
I was reading along like, Paul's gonna get this down for me. He's gonna put it into a language that Greg's brain can comprehend.
What's happening is I'm trying to read it and make it sound like I know I can read, and then when I'm messing up words, I'm focusing on that thing, and oh my god, people listening to the podcast are gonna think I can't read, and they're gonna make fun of me. They're gonna be writing comments, but I'll not be able to say them because I can't read, Greg. So what it says, as an example of what that would look like for writers, it would include bonuses like $9,000 for a half episode on Netflix, Amazon, or other major streaming services, and $40,000 for a feature-length film with a $30 million budget. Yeah, don't know what any of that means, but yeah, screenwriters have a new streaming deal according to that. Now, point 4 so point 4, just before you get into it, this was the big thing that kind of held up the negotiations last time.
Oh yeah, I was still trying to read it and go, let me see if I can understand this a little bit better. But it sounds like they'll get good money if a half-hour show is a success and an hour show is a success.
You get a bonus.
Bottom line.
Yeah.
Staffing terms and duration provisions have improved for episodic series. If a series is in between seasons or something happens during in the middle of development, There are now provisions in the WGA contract that ensure writers remain on television shows affected by the writer's strike, a global pandemic, or something else. It's good that they're factoring in another global pandemic. These are in the form of development rooms, aka pre-green light rooms. That's part of what I was talking about earlier. Development rooms and mini rooms established before and during the production of a series. Their minimum weekly rate compensation will follow the 9 weeks of work, 10 to 19 weeks of work, and 20 plus weeks of work models, and 3 writers in the room for 6 or fewer episodes. Got it. Oh, okay. And 5 if there are 7 to 12 episodes, and 6 if there are 13 or more. And I think one thing that's not mentioned here is that if it's 6, like there has to be a writer producer. A certain number of those staff have to be a writer producer, but you can kind of interchange between them. So if there's like 20 episodes, you don't need to have, like I'm talking about like showrunner or the people when they were saying they get paid $11,000 or whatever. The Article 14 writers, you need at least a writer producer for like 2 to 3 or something like that, right? If I'm not mistaken. Do you remember that, Paul? Do you know that information?
That sounds good.
I was trying to contribute to this paragraph here, and I think I did it.
You've contributed nothing. And the next couple of points is basically the next point is screenwriters have secured a minimum writer's room size and compensation structure. So again, it's kind of tying into that. You'll have a minimum amount of staff on, I can't say minimum this week. You'll have that many amount of staff on a show that'll help you out. You know, if there's a lot of stuff you need to go through, it's not just resting on one person's shoulder. The next one is screenwriters have secured an improved pay deal, which obviously, you know, if you're striking, it's pretty much 100% always going to be down to pay disputes. Along with this, point 7, screenwriters will receive better health insurance and pension contributions, which again is to be expected in a strike. But the most interesting one, I think, even though I've probably said that for every single point, is that Hollywood's use of AI in the writing process will be way more transparent. So what they can do now is that there were lots of rumors. Obviously, Greg, you know about it, that AI was going to get brought massively into the way that things were going to be written going forward. And we even saw during the strike that there were several job listings for people like AI person who looks over technician stuff, and it's like 180 grand a year or something crazy. And there was that big worry that AI was basically going to get brought in to take everyone's jobs. And what would happen was Hollywood would go to the machine, type in some prompts like, make $1 billion movie for me. And they'd pop out a script that was like Avengers Endgame 2. And they would then hire a writer to come in, pay them a basic rate, and basically just go through the script and correct the spelling mistakes and be like, oh, Tony Stark's dead. So we can't really use him and stuff like that. Now, what's actually happened with this deal is they pretty much scrapped, I would say, a majority of all the things that AI would be doing. So a writer can now decide whether they want to use AI or not. I would be like, yeah, so that I'm taking the weekend off, mate. Write the whole script for me. But no, obviously, yeah. So any material generated by AI can't be used to undermine a writer's credit or be considered source material. A writer can, of their own free will, choose to use AI as a tool provided by the company, as long as the company consents to this. That being said, as well, a company cannot require its writers to use AI software as part of their work. The company also has to be upfront with the writers about whether materials given to them during the course of their work have been generated through the use of AI. The WGA can assert the exploration of writers' materials, particularly to train AI, which is prohibited under law. It's crucial that writers know what's happening to their material, consent to how it's used, and understand whether ideas could be plagiarized, misrepresented, and altered by AI enough to effectively put them out of business. So we've basically, Greg, we've stopped Skynet before we've basically stopped Skynet before it all kicks off. Now, another thing that this kind of ties into, SAG's meeting this week, I believe on Wednesday, to talk to the ATMTPPT about everything. Judging by how this deal's gone, I'm guessing something's going to happen closer to that. Now, you might remember a couple of weeks back, we talked about how actors could be brought in, scanned, given like $50, and then told to do one. and basically the studio could use their complete body scan as a part of someone in the background of a scene or an extra or something, and never have to pay them again. Judging by this, it sounds like they're going to scrap that as well, which I'm hoping, because that just puts so many people out of work.
Mm-hmm.
But hearing that AI is getting shut down and writers can choose whether to use it or not, they can decide and consent on whether their work's used and pulled into AI. It sounds bloody great. What you feeling on that, Greg?
It all sounds great. I still think that it doesn't feel like I'm not 100% confident that the studios will completely oblige. I feel like there's going to be some shady things that still happen, and there's going to be things the Writers Guild or they're going to be fighting against. It's so easy to get away with using AI and not having to disclose it. You know what I mean? Because it's
Yeah,
AI. And something can be generated. It's like they could just find out if you can submit something and you don't have to disclose it. And it's hard to find the paper trail for something like that, So I still feel like that. I don't know. I got my cautious side up, like of I still think the studios might pull some shit and not disclose it to the writers because like one of the things is that if they have an idea, if the studios have an idea and they want to write and they want a writer to they hire someone to write it, but if the idea was generated by AI, they have to disclose that. And the fact that an idea was generated by AI might turn off a writer from wanting to do it just because of that fact, because like the fight and the divide between AI and writer is such a big gap, and there's it's it's turbulent, and I think that I'm basically saying that I think the studios have the capacity to do some AI shit and feel like they don't have to disclose it, and that's my big
yeah.
concern about it.
Like they buy an office for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, called like Allen Iverson 2. And
Allen
it's
Iverson
basically,
too.
it's like, oh, who can I just go meet my colleague in there? I haven't met him yet. "Oh, don't go in that room. Don't go in that room." And one night they sneak in to see what's going on. It's just a computer with a printer attached to it, just coughing out scripts. Very worrying AI, I find. The creator kind of brought me round on it. It was like, maybe AI is good and we can all be friends with it. But yeah, the fact that it's just completely putting so many people out of work. I can imagine there's so many freelance artists that are just not getting work anymore because YouTubers in the past would have used them to do thumbnails and they'll just instead type in a prompt and get the exact same thing. Well, that looks slightly off, but it is improving, to be fair. I think AI is going to get better and better, and it's
Yeah.
very unfortunate how much work it's going to take away from
I mean,
people.
you can get an idea from AI and just not copy and paste it, You're like, "Oh,
Yeah,
that's a great idea. All right, well, I'm just gonna delete this, and now I'm gonna write something," It's really easy to get
yeah.
away with it.
Yeah, that's why I'm so glad there's been these restrictions put in place, because I know I'm sounding quite jovial about it, but it is quite worrying. And yeah, just getting a victory over it on that, and we'll see what happens. These deals get negotiated every 3 years, so hopefully they stick to that. Because I think
Yeah.
Hollywood must realize as well that by doing this, they're killing their talent pool. There's going to be so many people in 10 years' time that haven't been brought up through the system and aren't able to produce shows for them at all, and they're just instead regurgitating all this crap. But to be fair, the creator bombed, so maybe they're just like, well, we're not going to try anything original anyway. Now, speaking of this is going to be the worst segue ever. Speaking of
Go for it.
unoriginal, Loki season 2, we got to
Woo!
see episode 1. I don't get why I even brought that into it. I was trying to come up with a clever way to go into this, but we'll just forget I'm an idiot, yeah, and just go right into it. So yeah, Loki season 2, Greg. We got to see episode 1. I've been very good. I've not watched any of the rest. Just watched the first one, written my script, done the audio. The breakdown's coming when the episode releases. Very excited to talk about it. When this is out, the embargo will have lifted. Greg, what's your thoughts on it?
Marvel was back, baby. I loved it. I really loved the hell out of it. I rewatched season 1 leading into it, and you put out a tweet that was talking about how it's even better as a binge. And yeah, I watched them like one day at a time. So I didn't watch it like 6 hours straight or something. I did watch it one day at a time, and I think it actually was a better experience that way. And I had forgotten just how freaking amazing Loki actually is. Like that was such a fantastic show, and it still holds up so well, and it's directed really well. And one of my little concerns was the fact that Kate Herron wasn't returning to direct, when I thought it was one of the rare cases in Marvel where I could feel a director's unique vision around it regarding, the camera movement, aesthetics, symmetry, all that good stuff that a director has to come in and formulate. And they brought in the directors, the people who worked on Moon Knight. And while I liked Moon Knight overall, I still felt like, maybe doing that was because they might be able to control them or something to that regard. And I gotta say, following in the shoes of Loki season 1 and Loki season 2 with these new directors, it it was very, very, like, very beginning. It's a very impressively shot series. A lot of times you talk about with the MCU of rare is the day where you feel like there is something truly special in the way the visuals are done or the cinematography, the camera work. And that was the first thing that really stood out to me because it's darker, but like mood wise, tonal wise, I kind of got the vibe of. I kept liking it to like even the way a lot of these long shots were done of like a 70s sci-fi horror in a lot of ways. And I was very, very much impressed by the way it was shot. At times it looked like it was even captured on film, which there's no way I doubt it was. But it doesn't feel like they shot it on a volume. It's not just impressive because of like cool green screen or visual effects. It's all the in-camera work that really generated a very specific tone that I was just so gravitated towards. And it is visually beautiful, but it's intense, great ticking time clock. Just that first episode alone, once I realized, I was like, oh crap, there's only 10 more minutes left in the episode. I just didn't want it to end. And I really think people are going to be very happy with this. It is really,
Definitely.
really good, and it's menacing. It is what it's one thing I was mentioning to you when I was rewatching it was how um it brought me back to when Loki season 1 ended and they had He Who Remains and the setup for the multiverse, and it was such an ominous threat, and it got us all jacked for what the possibilities were and what the threat level was of what's to come after Loki season 1, and nothing really lived up to what they set up. Even the stuff I really loved, the properties I loved, in terms of tying it back to what was set up at the end of Loki season 1, nothing really delivered, and especially Ant-Man Quantumania did not deliver. And then in the first like 10 minutes of this, it I wish this came earlier because this is what I wanted after the events of season 1. This was the vibe I've been craving, and I'm salivating at it, man. I am satiating
Yeah,
for more Loki right now. I thought it was
totally
fantastic.
agree. Completely agree. Yeah, I was blown away by it. I did go back and rewatch Loki, and I just going from that finale into this. We're not going to do spoilers, by the way, guys. I know it's heavy spoilers. We might talk about some stuff that's been, talked about at like Comic Con or D23 or at events when they've shown it. But beyond that, we're not spoiling any plot points. But it has been said publicly that the show picks up immediately after the events of season 1, and it just literally throws you into it. It's such a good moment. The way they open up, it's got real focus on that Kang statue, and then it just all kind of hits the ground running. And I was really blown away by it. I think it goes just beyond just being a sort of. I'm not waving at my camera. I'm trying to get it to focus. I was blown away by how the camera moves on it throughout. It's difficult when you're reviewing something to talk about how good everything is kind of framed and the way the cinematography hits and stuff, because it's not something, when you come into a review, it's normally talking about the performances and part of the story and where it goes. But in terms of just the way the show looks and the way it moves, there's lots of things that are shot in one take. It's almost like a stage play at part where there's
Mhm.
actors coming in and interacting with it, and it's very quippy. It's not the goofy, stupid MCU humor. It's all written as part of the characters and how they feel naturally. It just works so well. Like I said, I've only seen the first episode. I don't know how much you've watched. But it's yes, but it definitely feels like a step up and it's elevated. And I was talking to you guys about it yesterday, saying that I kind of wish they just ended Loki season 1 and then not really released anything and then dropped this. And I think that there's obviously every week we talk about superhero fatigue, and every like it's such an over talked about thing, and it's because of how many mid movies we're getting and all the projects that kind of almost hit the mark, but kind of more tire the audience out because they know what to expect by now. This just completely blew me away. Really, really well acted. It's non-stop. There's lots of really good twists and turns in it, and for the fact that we almost kind of know where the MCU is going as well, there's still so much mystery to this. Like there's a scene involving a lift and a character that they have in it, and not a
Mhm.
twist, but something happens. And even just little bits like that, you can kind of figure out what's going on, but you're sort of piecing things together. And the way that they do time travel as well, just in this episode alone, it is really really well done because you've got characters meeting certain characters in the past that then affects conversations they have in the future, and then they go back to the past and have them, and you see like a conversation playing out across two different time periods. Just really well written. I was really well written, really well directed. The MCU is back. We're back to shilling. I was
We're
completely
back to
blown away
shilling.
by it. Yeah, and if the series can keep up this level, I think it's going to be by far the best Disney Plus show, because that Loki, that first one was what people always say. It's like, oh, it's the best Disney Plus show. This is like above that from what it feels like, from the tones that you get. And I
Yeah.
think you guys, when you sit down and watch it, like I said, it's difficult to visualize when you're talking about camera movements and stuff, but you'll sit down and watch it and just the way that you
You'll
follow
know.
through the
The
scenes, and
first few
yeah,
minutes, you'll know. Yeah. The first few minutes, you'll be like, "Oh, wow, I feel it."
yeah, going back to that first season, you do kind of realize how static everything was. But it's just got such a great flow to it, very dynamic. You can really tell they took their time in rehearsal and mapped everything out. And I don't know if this is a spoiler, but it takes place in the TVA. And what could happen is that you'd basically have very boring looking office rooms, corridors, and stuff, all in one location where people are just having conversations and stuff. And that could be, even me describing it there, it sounds boring, but they managed to really ignite the scenes and have them just constantly popping off because of the way characters move and their actions and expressions and the conversations they yeah, it's brilliant.
Yeah.
I really really enjoyed it. I can't praise it high enough of that first episode. Episode 2 gonna be one of those filler episodes, and be like, oh, you shill, you were wrong, you said it was good. But yeah, brilliant first episode.
Yeah. I get what you're saying about the sets. They feel very tangible. Like they're lively, but everything feels very tangible. Again, it doesn't it's especially with Disney Plus shows. A lot of times with like the sci-fi ones, it can just feel like you're on some big green screen set. And I rarely get even the times where it has to be a green screen set. Like there's just no other question about it. It has to be a big volume or a green screen. It still feels tangible, and it doesn't feel like the actors are locked off to a small little location. The scope of it is very impressive, and it's crazy because as we're talking about it without giving any details at all, it's sounding like, oh, did they do a lot in this episode? Yeah, they actually do a lot. Now that I think about it, there's so much that happens in the 40 minutes. Um, Yet it doesn't feel over convoluted. It breathes really well, and it forces you to pay attention in a way that's gripping, not just like pay attention because you got to keep up with how this is all going. It is truly gripping stuff, and everything that worked. like Loki and Mobius, everything that worked in the first season that people loved, it just feels magnified here in a way that feels like a natural transgression and upgrade from the last one. There are elements to it that I liken to, like Doug Liman did Born Identity, and then Paul Greengrass did the next Born movies after that, and it's not exactly that, but in terms of like more refined, darker tone, feeling more realistic yet bigger and heavier. That's kind of where I would liken that direction. Without it being, because it's even more handheld too than the first season, but it's still smooth.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really loved it, man.
And it-
I cannot wait to watch the second episode. I'm very
yeah.
very jazzed about what they're doing right now.
Yeah, and it's quite a small cast as well when you think about the amount of people that are in the episode. And like I said, I kind of do liken it to a stage play where it's very, performance and character driven. And yeah, it's not much of a big cast, but just the way they sell the lines and the emotion of it. Kehu Kwan as well. He makes his debut in this episode. Great character, very funny.
Brilliant.
Comedic timing is just spot on. Just kind of seems like a lost little lamb, but who's kind of being like, oh yeah. So they do some really fun stuff with him. Yeah, and I mean, obviously he's won his Oscar and he's done lots of multiverse things and whatever. But yeah, he came in, just stole the show a bit, and great new addition to the cast as well.
Yeah, he's got that sincere, engaged, aloof yet committed energy. He's the perfect actor to step into this world, and coming from Everything Everywhere All at Once, which is a big multiverse movie, and here it's not the same performance; it's a different character, but the things you love about what he brings to a role are ever present here. I think he's so perfect. He's perfect. But it's a good month for superhero stuff, man, because we got Gen V as well,
Mm.
which is also fantastic. That's how you transition, Paul. That's how you
That
transition.
was
I
perfect.
did it. It's perfect.
That's what I should have done. So Gen V was I've seen episode 4 now. They've announced that Tech Knight's going to be in it, so I don't feel like I'm spoiling it by saying that.
Ooh.
What they do with Tech Knight, I'm a big fan of Tech Knight in the comics. He doesn't have much of a big run. He has a couple of issues to himself in the Get Some arc. But I think everyone who's read The Boys, they will remember exactly what happens in that arc. And it's sort of his arc is when it really got going, I feel, in the comics. I think it was about issue 7 that he popped in, and up until that point, you'd had the crazy wild stuff going on, and haha, isn't this funny? But during that arc, you met the legend, and then you also met Tech Knight, who had a just wild thing that happened to him, and I think that he was really when it got on board, and because of that, I was a bit apprehensive about how they were going to play it, and I hadn't heard of the actor before, had no idea who he was. I wondered how this would fit into a high school aesthetic, and though it's not in line with the comics, what they do with Tech Knight is absolutely brilliant. It is so good. The boys the boys has always been really creative at taking the source material, pushing it in a new direction, and they've done this with Tech Knight. And as soon as you guys see what he's parodying. Obviously in the comics he was a Batman parody. They don't do that, but what they have him parody is just so funny, and he's just got you'll instantly recognize it and what it's referencing as soon as you see the scenes, and it's just kind of playing the detectives up and stuff. And yeah, what they do with them, it's brilliant, and I really really enjoyed the episode. Kind of has a cliffhanger as well, bit of a sort of question about what's going on, and it's another banger. And I think those first 3, I was so apprehensive about the Gen V falling off, and I thought, spin-off shows, there's very rare cases where the spin-off shows are as good as the main one. And it's early days at the moment, but it definitely feels like it has the potential there. And those first 3 episodes I think were brilliant. Episode 4 I think is brilliant as well, really really good. Count me in. Fridays are going to be a very busy day for me, but worth it because they're pumping out great quality with his stuff.
Yeah. I think oftentimes spin-offs, especially that are airing simultaneously. I mean, it's like The Boys season 4 is not out yet, but we're going to be getting The Boys season 4. Sometimes a spin-off can just feel like a spin-off. And this manages to feel, how would I put it? I don't think if you watch Boys season 3, you need to watch Gen V to watch Boys season 4. I don't get the impression that's the case. Maybe it is. At the same time, though, I still get I simultaneously have the feeling that it feels like essential viewing to me. That's how great I think Gen V
It's
actually
like
is.
it's
Hmm?
like The Boys season 3.5. I think the tone's exactly the
Yes.
same. I think the jokes and humor are the same. The way it's directed and shot feels exactly the same, and you can transition perfectly into it without it feeling like it's an alien product off doing its own thing.
Same time, it's very different, and more. It's all those things, but also very different at the same time. And I think that's like the perfect ground for a spinoff, where you feel like you are definitely in the same world. And one thing that really, I mean, I've only seen up to episode 3, so maybe episode 4 completely undoes the thing, element that I found to be like, oh, here's why I feel like this might be essential and maybe really factor into Boys season 4 is how the end of like a lot of the Boys is often dealing with Homeland. God, I cannot think right now. Butcher and the boys, trying to take down, the Seven and all that.
The
Vought.
Seven, yeah.
And here you're dealing with Gen V, this college, and this is where the supers go through before you can even get to being part of the Seven, essentially, right? Like this is the one of the essential steps. And so while the Boys deals a lot with exposing Vought, this is dealing with exposing the stage before that, which is the college, and you have your core characters, which I like the spin on it because the Boys often is portraying their supers as all bad, and here you're getting the impression that this is before they're all corrupted and maybe they have an opportunity to become good supers, but it's also showing that there's other corruption elements that are happening within, what is it called? Goldolkin? How do you pronounce it?
Godolkin.
Whatever the Godolkin, yeah.
Godolkin, yeah.
This is the part of the podcast where I can't talk, but yeah, it's part that they're exposing that stuff, and if you can uproot that, like I'm surprised we haven't had anything. If this has always existed in the universe, where you've had Butcher and them try to attack what goes on at this college, because this feels like such an essential part of the world of what leads into the Seven and Vought. It's a critical part of the development, and now we're going to be uprooting the sinister acts here. And then what happens when you uproot the sinister acts at this very essential spot that even you see characters like Ashley from Vought who are very much involved in what's happening here at this college. So to me, it feels like essential viewing. It feels like you have to watch this show. I I don't feel like the writers would want to have you depend on that for going into Boys season 4, but I do get the impression that you get so much more out of it if you watch this. And on top of that too, it's like
Yeah.
they did such a great job of introducing new characters, and they're all written so well, and it's so layered, and it does feel like dark college mutant high sky high kind of deal. It feels like the way how the Boys has sort of that more realistic take on the supers and what they would be like in real life. Well, what would it be like when aspiring youth who have superpowers, who are also dealing with the fact that they're aware of that their parents got greedy and injected them with this stuff? You know, like something with X-Men is the mutants, right? And you often deal with the youth, the mutant youth. And at the end of the day, a lot of times you watch it and it's like, yeah, they have the tortured soul aspect, but so much of the time when you watch X-Men, it's still going, but look how cool it is, though. It's still cool. Yeah, there's prejudice stuff happening. There's racism stuff happening. And yeah, they got some tortured soul elements. And sometimes they really just make it all about that. At the same time, though, you often do go, man, that's pretty cool stuff. It's still pretty cool. I would still prefer to be a mutant, though, because look at all the cool powers you get. And here they really do the allegories and the metaphors they draw between like so I'm trying to watch my words here for YouTube. The self harm qualities, and the struggles that young
Eating
people have.
disorder and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, the way they draw those parallels and how they kind of make it a cyclical thing between like their powers and how it all ties in, I think is brilliant. They really do showcase the things that I feel like. Yeah, I love X-Men and all that, but they show you the true darker side to it, where they makes having powers seem unpleasant, and the society they throw you into that much more unpleasant as well. So while it doesn't have necessarily that racism side, that prejudice side that X-Men deals with, I think they capitalize on something else that feels more internally sinister in a lot of ways. So yeah, I really loved it. I really love this a lot. I think I got like two very different comic book based shows that are airing this month. Two extremely different ones, and they're both awesome. They're both awesome. It's a good
Yeah.
month.
Yeah, and then it's followed by Invincible as well. So I mean, it's
Yes.
going to be a great couple of weeks. Really, really looking forward to it. I wish they'd spread this stuff out more, Greg. Do you remember September last year? It was literally a different. I think in September it was like um, Rick and Morty
Yeah.
Monday, Andor, She-Hulk, Rings of Power, and House of the Dragon all in the same
Oh
week, and it
yeah.
was a nightmare to work it. But it's kind of hit that point again now where it's like you've got two amazing superhero shows. Like, just spread them out through the year. Just give them a bit of breathing room because both deserve to be seen. I think that the upcoming episode of Gen V is one of the better boys episodes that we've ever
Hmm.
had, just because of how good Tech Knight is and how funny it is. He just completely comes in, steals the show, and yeah, just a great performance. It's got a really sinister side to it, but it's also hilarious and yeah, they're masters at this point. They know exactly what they're doing. I was watching a video the other week. I can't remember exactly what it was called, so apologies for not shouting at the channel. But they said that what the boys can do brilliantly is that it can do all the stuff that the MCU does really well, but it can also make fun of the stuff that they do badly. So it's not really falling to the pitfalls that the MCU has, and it's just kind
Mhm.
of elevating above them. And yeah, brilliant first 4 episodes. I think you guys are going to love it. I think you guys are going to love Loki as well. And yeah, I'm really excited to talk about them. I feel enthusiastic about it for once, Greg. Back
Yeah.
in this superhero stuff. Really good job all around, guys. Well, you should be proud of yourself.
Let's just hope the DCU can live up to it.
He's done it. He is the
I
transition
did it.
guy. This guy, Segway. I don't call him Segways. I call him Gregways. You know what I mean? This is so
Ooh.
good.
Right call, Paul. That was
So,
great.
James Gunn, he's given some clarity on the DCU.
Has he?
Because obviously everyone's kind of, is it James? Is it canon? Do I need to go see this one? Because at the start of the year you said I need to go see it, and I went to see it, and nothing happened in it, James. So can you
Yeah.
have some clarity on the future of the DCU? So this is what James has said: nothing is in canon until Creature Commandos next year. A sort of aperitif to the DCU, and then a deeper dive into the universe with Superman Legacy after that. It's a very human drive to want to understand everything all the time, but I think it's okay to be confused on what's happening in the DCU since no one has seen anything from the DCU yet. I don't think anyone knows I don't think you know what's going on, James. Warner
Yeah.
Brothers come in every other week and they're like, this week can you go out and say The Flash is the best movie ever made and Aquaman's 2 is definitely going to be important going forward. But yeah, so he said, and yes, some actors will be playing characters they've played in other stories, and some plot points might be consistent with plot points from dozens of films, shows, and animated projects that have come from DC in the past, but nothing is canon until CC and Legacy. And then he went on to clarify Sholo Maridueña will continue playing Blue Beetle in the DCU, as Viola Davis will Amanda Waller, and John Cena will Peacemaker. And they've actually announced 40 minutes before we pressed record, Peacemaker 2 is in the works. So what are your thoughts on that, Greg? What the hell are you thinking?
I'm thinking that he's saying I don't need to watch Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. So that's a tank. I don't think this really because everyone's been saying he's providing clarity, and at first you're like, okay, so it's essentially a reboot, and then he says some other shit, and you're like, but wait a minute,
Yeah.
now I'm back to being really confused about this, especially with will they call it Peacemaker season 2, or are they gonna do essentially like a is Daredevil Born Again Daredevil season 4? Because it sounds like it's not, but it also sounds like it is, and I guess we won't know till it's out, right? Um, are they gonna kind of do that method? Because there's so much about Peacemaker that was so tied to the Suicide Squad, which was very much part of the DCEU, and they even have in Peacemaker season 1 the Justice League cast show up, you know, which had Aquaman and the Flash and all that. So to me, if you're just doing Peacemaker season 2, it makes it more confusing. And then considering that Blue Beetle, announcing who's still going to remain, I feel like you can get away with Viola Davis easily. Easily. To me, that's like a J.K. Simmons situation with J. Jonah Jameson. Like, yeah, she's perfect as Amanda Waller. Just keep her. That makes the most sense. Just keep her. Why not? But Cholo and John Cena, that's the part of it where when you say stuff like that, I just kind of get more confused because you can't help but ponder. You might as well not say something, because then it just does throw a wrench in everything that you're ultimately saying when he is saying nothing is canon. Or is he intending to say that the canon will be clear once Creature Commandos comes out next year? That's when you'll understand what we're doing.
Well, comics have done this in the past. The New 52, that's probably the one in most recent memory where they were like, we're resetting everything, but what's going to happen is we're basically going to condense every major story from DC history into a 5-year span. We're putting that in
Yes.
place. So all of these things like The Killing Joke, Nightfall, just looking at my comics to try and remember stuff. Yeah, no Man's Land, stuff like that, that all got condensed into a big 5-year space, and it was said this happens over that time. Some of the stuff that you love and know is canon. Some of the stuff like Batman Shaman, that's not canon anymore. Don't worry about it. Batman Year One, great story, not canon anymore. It's 0 year this time. So I think what they're doing is copying that model where they're basically taking some things that worked from the DCEU and the things that didn't, and just saying, don't worry about that, mate. Don't worry about Shazam 2. We know you didn't see it. Personally, when it comes to building a universe, though I understand the principle of it, I don't think it's a good way to take things. And I think what's going to happen is that there's going to be this black cloud of the DCEU hanging over the DCU going forward. Because let's be honest, the last 4 movies, whatever, haven't been popular. No one's really bothered seeing them. Hardcore fans have, but in terms of general audiences, they've not bothered. And people who don't fully get, into this stuff, they're just going to see characters like maybe Zachary Levi, Shazam showing up in Superman Legacy or something, and they're just going to think it's tied into that old universe and just be like, oh, well, I didn't really like that stuff, so I'm not going to bother seeing it. I've always said hard reboot is the way to go when it comes to films. I know a lot
Definitely.
of people are being like, well, this is how it works in comics. This isn't comics, mate, and it's a totally different medium.
The cinematic visual medium is so different. It's so different.
Yeah, a comic takes like I don't know, maybe $500 to make once you've paid I don't know how much inflation's caused it to be, but let's say back in the day, they're very cheap to make in comparison to a film. You take a big shot at a film, you market it, it costs hundreds of millions of dollars. It's not the same as just doing a comic book universe, and there needs to be more planning, more thought about how this is going to play out. And just, I feel like they're making the wrong step every step of the way. Sure, Amanda Waller and so on, that they can come across, but I just don't think it should be tied to that old universe. And I really do think that hard reboot is the way to go. I feel passionate about that. I feel like that meme of Walt from Breaking Bad when he's stuck in the Jeep shouting and no one can hear him. I feel like that. It's like, how can you not see that there isn't the goodwill behind the DCEU to justify bringing that into your new universe? There's not the people and fan base there that are going to help to catapult it, and the people who aren't fans, they're not going to jump on board because they're just going to see it as a continuation of the DCU, and just things that they're doing strategically, like starting off with Creature Commandos. That's not unfortunately, if you're building a live action universe, to me, you don't start off with an animated movie. Something like Spider-Verse, sure, it's been a great success, but that was never pushed as being like, we're making a Spider-Man universe over at Sony. It was very much just like, oh, here's a little animated Spider-Man movie. Oh, what, it's done well? Yeah, we're going to make more sequels. It's going to become something. And I think just, yeah, everything kind of seems like up in the air at the moment. The fact that Aquaman 2 is not even out yet and they're already coming out and being like, nothing, that doesn't
Doesn't
matter,
matter.
mate, until Creature Commandos. It's like, well, yeah, I don't even care that much about Creature Commandos. I'm a big DC fan. Don't think I'd ever read a Creature Commandos story ever in my whole life. Think it's the wrong way to start a universe. Just cut the cord, let it go, mate. It's over. You had an all right run. The audience is telling you they're not interested in these movies or characters. Start again with Superman Legacy and just go from there. Stuff will work out a lot better instead of you trying to retroactively tie things back into the past and be like, well, Wonder Woman 84, throw that Blu-ray away, but keep your Wonder Woman Blu-ray because that one matters, but just forget that there's a link to Bruce Wayne from Batman v Superman in it and just throw that away, but also throw the Man of Steel one away because Superman
Yeah.
Legacy is the first one. Just
Well,
didn't work for me.
a lot of people were, like it. We're trying to liken this, and speaking about keeping some of it and then, erasing others to like the New 52, right? Where you had an event, and then after that event, multiverse and canon shenanigans took place, and then now some of this remains and other things no. The, it doesn't sound like they have an event in place in order to establish that. A lot of us were under the impression that it sounded like maybe that's what the Flash movie was going to do.
Yeah,
In
well, that's what
fact,
they wanted to happen.
and I think James Gunn even said some shit, right? I thought in his announcement he said something that really had us all think, okay, then they are doing that. That it's gonna. I think he said
Well,
it's gonna be the reset or something. If I'm not mistaken,
yeah, to be fair, the Flash does work as a reset.
does it?
Obviously brings across George Clooney, but
Yes.
it does change certain things out and alter the universe slightly. Slightly. Some things are the same, some things are changed. Just what James is going for. But it wasn't a success. It was one of the biggest flops of all time, which is so yeah. If you're an executive in Hollywood, you need to start panicking and being like, maybe we shouldn't be using this as a plot device.
Yeah. I have no idea. Um, I don't know.
I think unfortunately, James Gunn doing this strategy of saying none of this shit matters. It's not working. Hype. The MCU, sure, it's had its midpoints. It's had lots of drops since Endgame. I mean,
But
let's be
Feige
honest.
stays
The
strong.
MCU, yeah, has never kind of recaptured the goodwill. Maybe around No Way Home.
Mhm.
But it's been diminishing returns for a lot of time. I feel like Loki will get good positive conversations around it, but Feige, he always tries to sell the movies are important. It's always like, well, um, Black Widow, it's introducing the first female Marvel superhero solo film, and the Eternals. Oh, this is introducing the most diverse team, and the Celestials are going to be a big thing going forward. And there's going to be some people introducing the post-credit scene. Shang-Chi is a very important character introducing the Ten Rings. He's not out here going, "Oh, none of this shit matters until Secret Wars, mate. Just sod all this. It's none of it's canon." What do you mean we've got a movie coming out next month? Um, it feels like they're trying to build something, and even the slate that James Gunn announced, it didn't really feel like it was building up to something. You know what I mean? It felt like they just got some comics, slapped them down on the ground, and were like, "Oh, that's coming out. The Authority's coming
Yeah.
out. Green Lantern's coming out." It's not building towards something, and I think just unfortunately, the way the internet is, the conversation with them not doing a hard reboot, it will be stuff like, "You kept your wife, but you got rid of Henry Cavill," and I'm not accusing him of that. But it will just provide this black cloud over everything where, because James Gunn uses his friends and family in a lot of things, they'll see him as scrapping beloved characters and actors to bring in people who are just his friends. And I know whenever we bring up that conversation, there'll be people who are like, well, Martin Scorsese works with the same actors all the time. Christopher Nolan uses the same actors all the time. The difference is that Nolan and Scorsese, when they're doing this, they're creating original films with original characters that people don't necessarily have that attachment to. Whereas when you've got a character like Batman or someone who's been around in the comics for 30 years, putting your friends and family in, it's going to rub people the wrong way. I think who already have that theory that James Gunn just casts his friends and family. They're just going to use that to be like, well, that he's not inventing new characters for them. And I think I just feel like it's going to create such a black cloud. And we know that they're planning to do 10 years of stuff, right?
Mhm.
Gal Gadot, she's playing Wonder Woman. Does Gal Gadot really want to be playing Wonder Woman from 2016 to 2033 or whatever? You know what I mean? I'm just screaming at it. I think Marvel and DC have recently had this issue with they want the audience to meet them where they're at, whereas DC and Marvel, they need to meet the audience where they're at. Like Echo,
Well put.
you can tell they're having a nightmare about that behind the scenes. And from what I've heard, just everything that's happening with it, they're really just they've hit a point where they're like, we don't even know if we want to release it. It got delayed to January. We've heard rumors that it was originally however many episodes. They've even cut one of them. They're dropping it all on one day to just rip the band-aid and get it out the way. It feels like they're trying to tell us that that's what we need to see. And they're spending all this money on these projects, and you're not meeting the audience. You're expecting the audience to come to you because that's what they love, and I just don't feel the audience love it anymore. And I think Loki. I think Loki's going to be successful, but coming out and saying this stuff like, "Oh yeah, we don't watch that stuff." Yeah, we're doing a new thing. Just come see it. It doesn't strike me as the correct strategy to take. Everyone's entitled to their opinion on it. Obviously, I might be wrong. I hope I'm proven wrong. But yeah, being a DC fan sure is tough.
Especially now. Is Creature Commandos a show or a movie?
I think it's a show.
And it's going to be like an
Yeah,
HBO show? Is that what they're doing?
yeah.
Or
I
a
mean, no
Max
one's
show?
gonna.
I don't feel like people are
Yeah,
going to
so
watch it. I
we don't. So it's a
I'll
TV
watch it.
series. I don't
Yeah,
even know if I will. I might binge it. But so it's going to drop in 2024. It's going to be part of Chapter One: Gods and Monsters, and it's going to have Amanda Waller assembling a Black Ops team called the Creature Commandos. Um, yeah. So, oof, do you think that is going to capture the audience's imagination and make everyone jump onto the DCU, being like, "Oh, I've got to go over to Max to get things in place"? I think it's just kind of one of those projects where they're saying it's attached to it, but if you don't watch it, you're not going to get penalized for not watching it.
I mean, you have two camps you gotta win over here. Probably more than two. Because you got your hardcores who will still, even if you're not liking the DC universe, whatever it is now, if you're like Shazam and everything that came out this year, even if you're not super into it, but you're still like, but it's DC, so I'm going to watch it. You got that camp out there of the people who are always going to go watch it, and then you got the bottom line is he needs to create a sense of unity for audiences, right? So maybe Creature Commandos, if that's really great, that could win over the hardcores. If the hardcore people who love DC are like, oh wait, this is giving me a good sense of sort of the vibe and but I feel like the Suicide Squad kind of already like his version of the Suicide Squad is already giving me an idea of what a James Gunn DC universe might feel like. And I love the Suicide Squad. I still think it's a fantastic film.
Yeah,
And
it's great.
when I hear Creature Commandos, like it sounds like animated Suicide Squad to me from everything that I hear about it. I'm sure there'll be differences, but from the initial pitch, it sounds like animated Suicide Squad. And then Superman Legacy has to be the thing that goes, all right, hardcores are going, Creature Commandos is good. Now it's Superman Legacy. You got to win over people who haven't given a shit, the general audiences. You got to win over all those people, and you got to win over the hardcores as well, and then of course you've had the, I don't know how much smaller the Snyder camp of people who, cry out their anguish over what's happened with, Zack Snyder, Henry Cavill, and Ben Affleck. I don't know how much that fervor has dwindled.
I wouldn't say it has. I mean, yeah, I still see it all the time. People still having arguments about it. I feel
Yes,
like the DC fan base is just extremely divided.
it's in and that's what I mean is like the goal here has to be create a sense of unity in some way. There's going to be people who are obviously never going to be happy, and people who might not ever be able to let go. And I think the main so the question is, will Creature Commandos and Superman Legacy, where he's placing a lot of his cards on here, will that be good enough to win over all these people? Because I think there's room for more confusion to come down the road. Admittedly, in the beginning, when first announcing the Elseworlds of the DC universe, like, oh, Joker will be Elseworlds, like that makes sense. I feel like that was already clear to people, right? That was something that was uniquely clear to people right away. That is its own thing, and I think even general audiences understood that. And then the Batman, saying that's going to be Elseworlds camp, and then they have other Elseworlds ideas in mind as well. Initially, that's really exciting to me, but when you think about how much Batman there have been so far, will that create some sense of confusion? And if not confusion, will it diminish interest, in wanting to see Batman in the DCU when we're already invested in the Batman via Elseworlds Robert Pattinson journey? Will audiences want to see both truly? Like, you know what I mean? Like that's the other question I think you got to ask yourselves. Like maybe it isn't a question of like, I'm sure they'll understand, but will they be interested? I think like the Flash movie is a great example of that. Like they've leaned so much on Batman in the marketing for that, and people didn't really care for it, and nostalgia did not win for it. And at that point, I was like, man, we just saw like Michael Keaton, we just saw freaking Robert Pattinson, we had Ben Affleck, and now we got Michael Keaton here,
And George Clooney,
and George Clooney. Let's not
3
forget
Batmen
about the
in 1
Jorge.
movie.
I think it does get to a point where I am a bit worried about that element because I actually love the idea of having two separate Batmen. Of you got Robert Pattinson in the Matt Reeves world. I think that's awesome. A very specific type of world, and you can have a really unique vision that is not tied to some timeline of continuity versus versus what they're going to be doing with Batman the Brave and the Bold, where you can get a very different side of Batman. It could probably feel a little bit more animated in its own way because he's got the kid there. He's got Damian Wayne with him. So there's something that really does excite me about having both sides of it. And that's the part of me that goes, okay, maybe that'll help audiences be interested in it. Like, okay, you got the young Batman with Robert Pattinson in a darker, more brooding version, and then you got this other Batman here. But will they be? I guess the question is will there be too much Batman happening where people just only want to invest their time in one? So there's room for concern here. I think there's reasonable room for concern, and a lot of this is obviously theoretical. We don't really know the answers yet, and James Gunn keeps saying that by the end of Superman Legacy, we should know what's really going on. But yeah, I'm really not 100% certain about that.
Yeah. I think, to be fair to James Gunn, to be completely fair to him, he has been handed a very bad situation where they were still pushing out 4 movies on whilst he was working on a new universe. And I think, that we've seen how badly the box offices of those have done. I'm sure it was like just on Shazam, Blue Beetle, and The Flash, Warner Brothers lost about $1 billion. And he's been handed this thing that's not very good. He's trying to launch out of it and pull it together. And again, I think I actually go to the other extreme of just going beyond just doing a hard reboot. I actually think DC need to take a chunk of years out, like maybe 5 years, just take a break, put a lid on this universe, take some time out, regroup, recast, and start afresh once Goodwill's had time to build back up, instead of just doing what they're doing, which is like going from one failed universe and trying to almost repair it. I don't think it's going to work. I think it's such a difficult task, and I think more times than not, you're going to fail, and it's going to have a worse effect long term, because if this universe crashes, then how big of a break are you going to have to take before you reboot the next one?
Right.
You know, you can fail on a one universe, take time out, and do it again down the line. But if you fail, try and repair it, try and build it back up, and that still crashes, then it's like you're just stuck, because it's going to be so, you're going to have to wait such a long time for audiences to get a gap where they no longer associate your films with those two failures to then build it back up. And it's, yeah, it's so difficult, the job he's got ahead of him. I wouldn't want to do it. Well, I would, because I'll probably become like a millionaire in a couple of months, but I wouldn't really want to do what he's got ahead of him. And I think, it would sound like a broken record. And I know I'm coming across very negative. I am passionate about this, and I feel that there's clear signposts about what needs to be done. And rather than acknowledging that, they're still thinking they're living 5 years ago, when superhero movies were $1 billion blockbusters guaranteed. And I just think it's going to lead to more trouble down the line, attaching yourself to this when there's not, the fan base are kind of sick of it, and that they're telling you it by the box office returns. If these movies were making millions and millions and millions of dollars, then I could totally understand why you'd want to be attached to that. But I think the mid reviews, the box office returns, the general love for these versions of the heroes in general, they're not, it's not there, and I think it's a mistake building it off that.
I agree. I agree with you, Paul. But
Yeah.
watch us love
So
Superman Legacy and Creature Commandos when it comes out, and we'll be like, James Gunn, our savior, Jesus Gunn over
Well,
here.
yeah, that is my hope, and I hope that 3 years from now, when I'm giving Superman Legacy a 10 out of 10, people clip this on Twitter and they're like, but look, we found this old clip of you saying James Gunn's a slag, and we're playing it to you because you're meeting him tomorrow for an interview or something. He's
Well,
decided to bring you along, and it was just all to humiliate me, and because I've been talking crap about him. But yeah, he might be a genius. This might be the master strategy that catapults DC ahead of Marvel, but we'll have to see. But yeah, I want to end on a positive note. Yeah, thanks so much, guys, for all your support these last couple of months. Obviously, there's not been that much news just because of the way the industry's been. We've had kind of a slower start, been more difficult start wise than I thought. But you guys have kept us on. Obviously, there's been way more people who are in worse situations than us, fighting to get paid fairly and stuff. So congratulations on this deal, which sounds incredible.
yeah.
And also, guys, as fans, we've got so much stuff to look forward to. Loki is going to be a blast. I promise you that. Gen V, from what I've seen, is incredible so far.
We got the
Positive
Ahsoka
times ahead.
finale tonight, man. Yeah, I
Yeah,
totally
yeah,
forgot about
Ahsoka
that.
as
We
well.
were so busy covering this other
Wow.
stuff. I was like, we got Ahsoka tonight.
Yeah. So yeah, lots of stuff to look forward to. Hope you guys rock it with us. And yeah, thanks a lot for sitting through the video. Make sure if you're on a podcast service, you hit a 5-star rating, helps us out, gets us all those amazing views. Please subscribe as well, and check out the merch store below if you want to get some merch. Greg's just launching a soccer t-shirt,
Got my
so
snip,
yeah,
snip.
head over there.
She's got scissors, light scissors.
Yeah, so thanks a lot, guys. Thank you, Greg, for joining me again, and we'll see you next week. Much love.